Support for Audacious with Chion Wolf provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Picture a funeral. What do you imagine? A somber gathering with everybody wearing black, a slideshow of someone's life set to music, a few hushed "I'm so sorries" and "this is so sad." Now imagine it's your funeral, but you're still alive to hear what people say about you. A funeral where the truth, sometimes painful, sometimes liberating, sometimes kind of funny, is revealed in front of everyone. Now imagine another funeral where the coffin isn't your typical brown rectangular casket, but is a giant mahogany sculpture made in the shape of a lion, or a chili pepper, or a Mercedes-Benz. There are people all over the world who are radically rethinking the way we say goodbye. And today, you'll hear from 3 of them. We'll take you to Ghana to meet a man who builds fantasy coffins, beautiful, elaborate sculptures that become a person's final resting place. And you'll hear from a perfectly healthy doctor who decided not to wait for his death to gather his loved ones to say goodbye. He and a few friends held a living funeral with candles, eulogies, the works. But first, Bill Edgar. He's a private investigator from Australia who's found an entirely new role for himself at the end of someone's life. See, when someone hires Bill, it's usually because they've got unfinished business. Secrets that they were too scared or too kind or too unbothered to reveal while they were alive. So they write it all down and send Bill to the funeral to speak on their behalf. Bill Edgar is the Coffin Confessor. How did he get into this line of work?
It started as a joke. I told a dying man that I'd crash his funeral for him, and he realised that doing his own eulogy wasn't a good idea because most of the family and friends actually see it before the funeral and they decide whether it'll be played or not. And when I told him that I'd crash his funeral as a joke, he took it seriously, and hey, I'm glad he did.
What did you have to say for him?
Whilst his best mate was performing the eulogy, I had to interrupt him and tell him to sit down, shut up, or off, because the man in the coffin's got something to say. And this is what it is. You're no best friend of mine. You've been trying to my wife while I'm on my deathbed. And if my brother, his wife, and their daughter are in the congregation, they can also off. I haven't seen them in 30 years. Why are they here paying their respects now? They're vultures in the family. I don't want to see them. I don't want to know about them. I don't want them here.
How did that go over?
I thought it was going to go over like a lead balloon, but it was accepted. Everybody there was quite not only emotional, but they wanted to hear what their loved one left unsaid. They really did. And anybody that wanted to ask me to leave or tell me to sit down, they were actually outed. They were told to shut up because my client, Graham, who was laying in the coffin, these were his words. They weren't mine. I'm just reading. I'm the messenger. And, his loved ones really took a liking to it. Those that were outed left very quickly. There was no confrontation. They just left. And I was happy for that too.
So that was one hell of a way to get started. And that could have been just the one time you did it. And that was a fascinating story that you get to tell for the rest of your life. But how did it turn into something that you do and are known for?
Yeah, exactly. I thought it would be a one-off. I had no idea it was going to be what it is today. So, I leave Graham's ladder on his coffin and I walk out. So I don't know if the funeral continues. I have no idea what happens. I mean, I'd love to be the fly on the wall, but I leave. And as I'm leaving and approaching my car, a young girl came up to me and thanked me for what I'd done for her father's funeral, which was really nice. But behind her was another young girl who asked me, and she pleaded with me to get in touch with her auntie, who was on a deathbed in hospital palliative care. And I thought twice about doing this, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go see her. And it was remarkable because from that funeral came another one, and then all of a sudden it was one little interview and it just went nuts. It went global.
Like interview with the news?
Yeah, the news about what I was doing, I was inundated with requests and services. And then all of a sudden, I received a call from a palliative care nurse who said, "Excuse me, we have a gentleman here who's had a fall at home. He'll never return home, and he's petrified about something left at home, but he's got no one to turn to. Are you able to assist?" And so I went and saw this gentleman. He was 88 years of age. His sons were on the way to his house, and he had a sex dungeon there. And I had to remove that sex dungeon. So all of a sudden, a door opened where I was going to people's homes and doing home sweeps. So not only was I crashing funerals, but I was crashing funerals, wakes, will readings. I was doing home sweeps. Then I'm starting to deliver gifts from the afterlife.
Say more about this.
So the gift idea came from a lady that had, it was basically 7 months after that she died. I was to hand a basket, and a bottle of wine and some tasteful things for this gentleman on their anniversary. And one of those tasteful gifts in the basket was a ladder. And in the ladder was a world trip that they'd been saving to do but could never go on. And all the money she used for her health and care and services for the hospital, but she never did. She saved it for him. And to hand that over and to see the look on his face and the emotion was just insane. And then that story got out. And then all of a sudden I'm delivering gifts, to various people. And then a gentleman asked me that if when he dies at his viewing, could I go to the viewing and can I pinprick his body because he's petrified of being cremated alive? And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll give it a go. And I did it. It was something that he wanted and he got. So the services just kept opening and coming and going, and I'm just, overwhelmed.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm interested in hearing more about when you have to deliver painful truths to the surviving family. What's it like when the person who's about to die tells you this information? And how do you feel right before the moment that you, the stranger at a wake or wherever, break the news?
When I hear a secret or confession, it's not me. But at the same time, I'm very happy and humbled to listen to them and to keep them a secret until they pass. When I deliver the secrets, I have no care or concern for those left behind. I couldn't give a about them. It's not about them. It's about my client in the coffin. Nothing more, nothing less. It's all about them. So obviously people are going to say, oh, it's very cruel, it's demeaning, it could be hurtful, but it's their funeral. You don't like it, off. That's it. Simple.
What are some secrets you've had to reveal that have been really kind of funny?
I had to out a gentleman that wanted to be outed, that he was gay. He was bisexual. He said gay at first, and he goes, you know what, I sleep with a lot of women, so let's make it bisexual. And I'm like, okay, no worries at all. But this guy was a big bikey bloke. He was to be feared just looking at the guy. So, to get his secret and to reveal it at the funeral was quite daunting because I'm surrounded by gang-related people, and I'm about to let loose. And a couple of the guys there actually said to me, they said, look, we'll allow you to say what you want to say, but if we don't like it, you're going in the hole with him. And I'd turn around and I'd say, you know what, I don't care whether you allow it or not, I'm doing it. It was very heated at the start, but then all of a sudden I let loose on what he wanted. I read exactly to the letter what he wanted. And those that truly knew this man and loved this man, they already knew. They knew. And that's the beautiful part about this. If you truly love somebody and you know them, you've got an idea. And just because it's released at a funeral, okay, well, it gives either, the validity of it or whatever it is, But at the same time, his funeral, I was to say in reference to, I am gay, and Steve, it's not you. Because Steve, there would be 5 Stevens at this funeral. So they all sort of started looking at each other. Now, the actual lover of this gentleman was not Steve. And that even made it funnier because all these 5 Steves are sort of going, And then their partners are looking at them and other biking members are looking at them and they're all looking around and I'm just cracking up inside just thinking, oh, my God, I'm going to get beaten by a Steve or 5 of them.
Well, to your point about like, if you really care about somebody, like, you know. And it makes me also think about, even if you don't know, there's the condition of the funeral. There's something that shifts when someone's dead. Like, you tend to speak well of the dead because there's just a shift. There's a letting go. There's a relaxing around what you maybe thought of them when they were alive. There's this honoring of the fact that they're gone. And so I know you don't really care about what they think about the news they're getting, but I also think that there is maybe a grace that people have for secrets because the person's dead.
Oh, absolutely. And whilst I sit there and I'll say, I have no care or concern for those left behind, that's true in regards to any of those that are sitting there that have got crocodile tears and that are vultures in the family. They're the ones that, but I've got to say, most recently I did crash a funeral at, it was a wake actually, and there was over 100 people there. And immediately as I'm on the stage and I've taken the microphone, I've said, excuse me, my name's Bill Edgar. I am the Coffin Confessor. Sit down, shut up, or off. The man in the urn has something to say and this is what it is, and I'll open his letter. And as I'm opening the letter, the first table I look at is a table of kids, teenagers, young, very young, and they're crying and I'm trying not to look at them. And I don't know what's in the letter for them, but I do know, and I quickly counted that there was, say, 7 of them, and they're the grandchildren. So I knew that was the table for the grandchildren. And I tried so hard not to look at them. And as I'm reading his letter, it finally got into my grandchildren. And it's then that I could actually look and focus at them and give them the sweet memories of their grandfather and his message from him to them. But it made me realise that that's going to happen to me. I've got 6 grandchildren under 6 now. And one day they're all going to be sitting at a table or sitting somewhere and, I'm not going to be there. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to have someone do this for me. I can do it myself. So I'm exploring holograms. And that's the idea I'm going down. So, and as well, I'll definitely leave a message. And I've done this already. I've always been prepared for death since I've done this. I could go today and I'm happy to go. I've done everything I can do. I've enjoyed life and I'm prepared.
Have there ever been any secrets you've revealed that you really wished you didn't have to?
The most concerning thing, I guess, I've ever been asked was to be a lady's suicide note. That was very hard. It was confronting. And at the same time, I thought, well, I am the Coffin Confessor. That's what I do. So I agreed to do it, but I did try as hard as I could for her to get help and assistance and everything else. But her message was read out to nobody. Nobody attended her funeral. It was very, very sad. It was very emotional, and no one collected her ashes. So I did, and I placed them in the water for her. Very emotional,
Because you've heard so many secrets, confessions, does anything surprise you anymore about the human condition?
No. There was a lady that approached me and she said, look, please tell my son that he's not my son. I'm actually the grandmother. His mother is his sister and their father is actually my husband, which is his grandfather. I mean, that was very shocking. It was very emotional again. At the same time, he knew something was up in his family. He had an idea. He just didn't know what it was. And when he finally realised and get told what it was, he was accepting and he was like, I knew something had up. He was astonished that his sister was actually his mum, but he then realised how caring she was towards him, and it all sort of fell into place. And it's weird how that happens, but it does. So, yeah.
You said that things don't really surprise you anymore about how people are. And you've talked openly about surviving abuse as a child yourself. And I wonder how that maybe shaped your instinct to speak up for people who no longer can.
Yeah, absolutely. Since 2018, when I first started this, I've received thousands of resumes for people wanting to do this. The offers I've got, the money I've been offered to, franchise this business is astronomical. And I won't do it because it's too easy to take the money and not do it. And I will not do it. My integrity will not allow me to have somebody rip off their dead. I'm not going to allow that to happen. And it's not a thing I'll ever do. However, going back to my childhood would haunt your nightmares. It was horrific. From the age of 7, sexually, physically, and mentally abused by 4 married men with children. My whole upbringing was just destroyed.
When you talk about what you went through as a kid, it makes me think that there's maybe in you a desire for justice and truth because you went through something that was unjust and dishonest and concealed to your harm. And I wonder how much of that is like a part of the satisfaction you get from this work that you do, this revealing the truth.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah. I fought the Anglican Church and the school for 35 years. And it was only in September last year that they finally stopped calling me a liar and admitted to what happened to me. And I accepted a payout. I even made a Facebook page called The Lost Boy of TSS, which, went phenomenal, and everybody started telling their stories, and it empowered me. And then I started, when I started, as the Coffin Confessor, I guess it's in me. It's been in me since I was 7. So, yeah. People will also say to me, they say, Bill, don't burn bridges, never burn bridges. Well, your bridges. You know what? I can swim, and I'm good at it.
Your story is so cinematic and fascinating and hilarious and sad and profound. Who do you want to play you in the movie?
Yeah, it's good, bad, funny, and sad, isn't it? I've been approached by thousands of people, wanting the movie and all this stuff. And now I've done a deal with people to do a drama series. It's episode after episode, and everyone's got a story, and it can never end because everyone's got a story. And I like the idea that I can contribute to it. I'm part of it. I get to write as well. And the other exciting part about it is they actually cast a woman, which I thought, wow, that's cool. And I'm hoping in the next week or two, we'll be able to reveal a bit more. So yeah, it's exciting.
Not that I want to take away any business from you, but what advice do you have for people who maybe have heard this conversation and they think, there's got to be something I can do to take some initiative over my life and my message and communicate to the people I love? What would you have them do?
People need to talk. They need to express what they want. They need to make a short video. Just recently had a mate that just died. He was on his motorbike and he just died. Now, he never left a message. He never left anything. There was nothing at all. And it would be nice just to go through somebody's phone and see a little video saying, hey, darling, I really want to say that if this ever happens to me, I love you to death. I really do. Thank you so much. It's just something simple, and just leave it there, store it, don't worry about it again, but it's there. So I believe that everybody should leave a message. I believe everybody should have an arrangement of what they really want. I will be cremated and thrown in the ocean.
Well, Bill Edgar, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and stay safe. Take care.
We'll have links to Bill's books and TED Talk at ctpublic.org/audacious. When we get back, how did Matt Morgan's local church react when he asked about hosting his own funeral?
They very politely wrote back and said, yep, that's fine. We normally do that for people who are Christian and dead. And it was a bit awkward. I was kind of neither.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Today we're meeting people who are reimagining what a funeral can be. Not just as a farewell, but as a truth-telling, meaning-making, sometimes soul-shaking event. In a little bit, we'll meet Jacob Ashong, a Ghanaian craftsman whose coffins are meticulously built to reflect the lives of the people who rest inside them. Now, we turn to a man who wasn't ready to die, but still wanted to experience what it means to be remembered. Dr. Matt Morgan is an intensive care physician in Wales who, in his early 40s, gathered his closest friends in the Pyrenees Mountains, lit candles, played music, and listened to people deliver eulogies as if he were already gone. He wrote about this experience in his book, A Second Act, What Nearly Dying Teaches Us About Really Living.
It's about 20 years now that I've been working as a doctor, and I work in this weird place where people tiptoe on the pathway between life and death. I work in the intensive care unit where everybody there is closer to death than they've ever been, pretty much. And I've long thought that after resuscitating a lot of these patients, I've often thought that it's those people who we should be listening to, not the influencers or the business gurus or the billionaires. These people know what really matters, especially those who have touched both sides of life and death. And so I'd kind of spent a decade scribbling down their thoughts and the things they say to me when they survive in a little red book that I carried with me in work. And that eventually made it into this book called A Second Act. I'd finished writing it, but there was something missing. And, as you know, in the creative arts or in writing or in podcasting, you're trying to solve, a jigsaw puzzle that only you can solve. And there was something missing in the middle. And what that was how can I ever empathize with these people who've been through something remarkable? And then the idea came, well, perhaps I should touch both sides. Perhaps I should have a funeral. Perhaps I should kind of die. And perhaps then I'll appreciate life.
See, I think a lot of people have the idea, however fleeting, wouldn't it be cool if I could be at my own funeral, if I could hear what people say? But they don't actually go ahead and do it. But some people have. You've commented in other interviews, ancient Greeks have done this. There was the American Wake when the Irish were moving from their home country to the United States and Canada. There was, in the 1990s, Takiko Minzui, a trailblazer in Japan's entertainment industry, had a living funeral on live television as a healthy 78-year-old. Talk about what you know about how this has been done before.
When the idea came to me, I'd known about the Japanese film star. I'd heard about some people having living funerals who've got terminal disease, like cancer, for example. There's a lady who started a charity here in the UK who died sadly of breast cancer and held her own living funeral. So I'd known about those things. And I actually wrote to the vicar in my local village. I live in a village by the sea in Wales. I wrote to them and I said, look, I'd love to have a funeral. And they very politely wrote back and said, yep, that's fine. We normally do that for people who are Christian and dead. And it was a bit awkward. I was kind of neither. And that really then made me think, look, this isn't about me. The reason I want to do this is to reflect on life as a whole, which involves friends and family and everyone else. So actually we did it as a group, which I think was a much better way to do it. It's less narcissistic. It's less about you. It's about community. Now, we went away to do it. So it was somewhere in the Pyrenees, in a beautiful place. And out of the 10 patients in the book that had survived, each of them kind of brought a lesson with them. And I wanted to put those lessons into practice. So the funeral we had, yes, we had a eulogy written by my wife, my parents, my kids. We had a favourite song, which a friend played. We had a celebrant conduct it all, but we also did things in and around the service, which were the lessons from the book, such as, for example, looking back at old photos. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how many photos you've got on your device. I've got about 20,000 photos on there. And yet, how much time do we spend taking versus looking back? And so we look back at old photos from youth, from people who couldn't be there, from people who died, for example. And there were lots of those lessons peppered in, really.
It's one thing to conceptualize this idea of a living funeral and get a couple of your friends together to do it. And it's another when you're actually in the process of it. I wonder how much of the experience of having and sharing living funerals was exactly like you thought it would be and maybe didn't quite break the surface of your emotional skin, and how much of it really gobsmacked you, like in your soul of souls.
Yeah, actually, it was exactly as you described. People took it super seriously, not in a serious way, but they cared about it. My good friend Carlo, who played all the songs, played the guitar, he's an amazing guitarist, amazing singer and guitarist. My song I chose was Night Swimming by REM, which for me is just a beautiful, nostalgic song. Carlo could play Night Swimming easily. He'd be the first one to say he really struggled to play it. And it wasn't because of the notes, it wasn't because of the fingers, it wasn't because it was a sunny day. It was because he just listened to a eulogy for me. He'd listened to a poem. He'd listened to what my mum had said about me. And, we've been friends since we were 12. And he's not an emotional guy, Carlo. So it wasn't just reflecting on our own lines. It was our friends that got me. It wasn't listening to my eulogy. It was listening to my best friend's eulogy. That's the thing that really got us there, actually. And it was also set up in a way, there was theatre to it in the good way. It played with light. There were candles lit at different points and blown out and relit. There was kind of a narrative to the service. And we laughed. We laughed a lot too. There was a lot of laughter there. But the best bit was, at the end, we had another chance. We had another go at things. We could listen to what was said. We could change. And out of those people who went, pretty much everybody has made a major change in their life, one way or another. Now, was it incidental? We're all in that weird 40s kind of place in life anyway. But somebody started doing volunteering work. Someone's changed their job. Somebody's taken a trip of a lifetime. People have changed stuff. And that was just through listening, through being together and through reflecting, really.
What did you change?
We were living in Australia. We emigrated to Western Australia, which is beautiful, compared to where I am now, which is in Wales, in the UK, which is beautiful in a different way. They say the grass is always greener. Well, actually, the grass was greener at home because it rains all the time in Wales. And Australia was amazing. More pay, better conditions, better coffee, terrible chocolate, pretty bad haircuts, actually. But we came home, and we came home because of community, because of connection, because of family. So that was the thing that was decided for me, actually, on that trip. The decision that let's go home. We've had a great time. Let's go home.
I want to hear more about integration, because I think about any time a big thing happens in somebody's life, it's like when you're in it, you're almost frozen in it, and it's happening, and it's a big deal, and there's going to be an after, but the after hasn't happened yet. And then the thing finishes. And I realize I'm talking to somebody who's been around a lot of people who've gone through big events in their lives. When was the moment that you really started to integrate this funeral experience, where you weren't in it anymore? The dust of it was maybe settling in your heart, and you were piecing together what was going to happen next for you.
Yeah, I guess I've cheated at that in many ways, because I think for me, the funeral was kind of a bit like a more concentrated version of a normal day in my life and a normal day in work. Every day I go to work and I meet 10 new families who are given the worst news of their life. Every time I meet someone, it's normally to tell them the worst news they've ever had. That's a normal day at the office. Not just for me, for loads of my colleagues and others in palliative care or other specialties too. And for some people, that chips away at them. It can cause burnout and other things. For me, it kind of does the opposite. It means when I go to work, as I'll go to work this week, I'll work a night shift, I'll meet somebody new who's critically ill, and it'll put into context all that other bother in life. Maybe I had a flat tire in the car that day, or I had a tax bill, or, the kids are struggling at school with something. It just instantly puts all that stuff into context. Not to say that other stuff doesn't matter. It does matter, absolutely matters. But I get pulled back to that reality for free every time I go to work. In fact, I get paid for it. It's like a stoical cheat. But for many people in lives, they don't get to see that tough side of life. And actually, the funeral, a lot of my friends who work in other industries, they kind of reflect on that through that funeral. And that started kind of affecting me ever since becoming a doctor, really, in a good way. It doesn't burn me out. It does the opposite. It kind of burns me in, so to speak.
I want to back up to the planning of the funeral. When you were talking about how you wanted to do this and how you wanted it to go and who would be there and where you would go and what you would say and what you would hear, when you were talking about it with your family and your friends, I'm curious about their reaction, but I guess I'm curious too about any sort of hesitation you might have had. And the first place my mind goes is, I don't want to seem arrogant, or I don't want to seem like this is all about me, or I don't want to seem like I'm doing something woo-woo in order for people to catch on to this idea that has been done before in history, but look at me doing it. Sort of, you know what I mean? Like, were you up against any of those weird sort of self-conscious feelings?
Absolutely. So you've hit the nails on the head with those three. I think narcissism is, something that this book, A Second Act, is almost an anti-narcissist handbook. It's saying, look, you don't matter. Of course you do, but life matters, community, all those things. So I really wanted to get that right. And I think doing that as a group really helped with that. I think doing that as an individual wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked for me or for the concept. So that was, I think, that thing. The reaction is fascinating. My family are quite used to me doing odd things and exploring concepts. So they were fine about it, he says. But actually, some of my friends who came along, one friend in particular, has had a really tough time with loss in his life of close people, family members and others from an early age. And I was super nervous about inviting them all together. But I thought, look, this isn't my decision to make, it's theirs. And do you know what? They were the one who was most in favour of it. Although, actually, their family were also the ones that were more hesitant about it. And I've also got a friend whose people close to them are going through this as a very real journey at the minute. Somebody who's relatively young and has got a terminal disease. So again, I didn't want to say, hey, this is just playful, we're just messing about. And actually, there could be a real funeral at some point soon. So that played in my mind hugely as well, actually. I think the way I hope, and I think the people who came say we did it well, is we asked a professional for help. This wasn't just a load of people messing about. There was a celebrant running this properly. And the ways we put it together and constructed it was actually the lessons from others who've had cardiac arrests in this book, who kind of almost constructed it for us, if you like. And I hope, using those three concepts, I think it did what we hoped.
I wonder about the quote unquote kind of people who would be drawn to having a living funeral. I'm thinking about how an analogy of, I love going to float tanks. I go to a float tank once a month and I find it incredibly therapeutic, among other things. And when I tell people about going to a float tank, I get one of two responses. Oh, I've always wanted to try that. Or I could never do that. And to them, part of me wants to be like, well, then you shouldn't. But part of me is also like, well, then you absolutely should, if you think you can't be alone with your thoughts for an hour or 90 minutes. And so in that spirit, I wonder, is there a kind of person, you think, who should really deeply consider having a living funeral? And for those who think, oh, I would never be okay with that, do you have a similar sort of, well, then maybe you should sense?
Yeah, what a great question. I've also been to a float tank, and I thought I'd be the kind of person who'd never want to go to a float tank, and I loved going to a float tank, and now I'm the kind of person who wants to go to a float tank. There's no such thing as an afterlife crisis. You're going to be dead for a long time. Do the weird thing now. it's only a weird thing for a short time. Experiences are there to have in life. It helped that this was a group, and yes, there were definitely people in that group who don't do the weird things, who, wear nice clothes and iron their shirts every morning. But it helped that there's therefore group cohesion and pull along in order to do that. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Who do you think a living funeral would be best for? And maybe some people are thinking, well, this guy's in his midlife crisis and this is... Do you think that this is something, it makes me feel kind of queasy to ask this, but do you think this is something that young people should consider doing? Is this something only for people who are in their midlife or somewhere kind of around it? What do you think?
What I would say is that human society, pretty much through every cultural change and revolution and age, has had some kind of thing to reflect on life at important points. And, sometimes this has been ayahuasca in South America. Sometimes this has been the Greek Euclidean mystery, which you mentioned before, in a cave with music and light in. There's always been something. And we're in this slightly odd age of, the death of religion in some sectors or the loss of meaning in some other sectors. It's hard to describe what it is, but what there is seemingly is a bit of a vacuum of a time to reflect, or time to come of age, or time to do something. And I don't think there's one right time for everyone. I think times of change in your life where you're not quite sure which way is up, which way is down, what's next, that would be a great time to do it. When you're younger, perhaps it would take a form of something different. People go traveling to find themselves. So, yeah, I think no matter what age you are, I think it's important to construct some kind of situation where you can reflect and look and think. And for some people, that might be a living funeral. For some, it might be traveling. For some, it might be something completely different.
I like the idea of imagining living funerals being just something we do, like a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or, a quinceañera, or we can play it forward and maybe, other sort of celebrations and markings of life. If living funerals were a normal thing people did, how do you think the world would be different?
Well, I think one thing would definitely change. I had an auntie called Auntie Wynne, my great Auntie Wynne. She was 97. She was an incredible woman. She lived a really full life, from being involved in the D-Day landing. She was a plotter of maps in Churchill's war rooms. She was a dancer. She was an incredible woman. And when she died at 97, I went to her funeral. I read a letter as a eulogy. And people kept saying the phrase which stuck with me, which is how much Auntie Wynne would have loved that day. It had all her favourite people, all her favourite food. It had her favourite music. Oh, Wynne would have loved this. And I just thought, yeah, why couldn't she come to it? She could have come to it. This wasn't an unanticipated event. We could celebrate people when they are there, and we could tell them in person how amazing they are, rather than talk about it when they can't be there. So I think it would probably help people be more compassionate. I think it might help people be more honest about them and about others. And it may help people not do the things in life that they are just doing for the sake of it, because they are the normal things to do. I think.
Yeah, that harkens back to how you started your book by referencing the Steve Jobs quote, "Death is very likely the single best invention of life."
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't feel like that when you're there. And this isn't to dilute tragedy. This isn't to dilute people who've lost people at young ages or at old ages or whatever age. This isn't minimizing death. This is about maximizing life.
Well, Dr. Matt Morgan, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
We'll have a link to Dr. Morgan's book, A Second Act, What Nearly Dying Teaches Us About Really Living, at ctpublic.org/audacious. After the break, coffins don't have to be somber or standard. Hear about the fantasy coffins that Jacob Ashong builds, like
the lion coffin, the eagle coffin, the Rhino coffin. We have a lot of the Mercedes Benz. Yeah, so these are some of the outstanding pieces we usually do.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. What if a funeral isn't just about the ceremonial stuff? What if it's also about form? About creating something so personal, so artistic, that even the coffin tells a story. In Accra, Ghana, funerals are vibrant celebrations of life, and the most dazzling part of many of them is the coffin itself. Fantasy coffins, they're called. They're built to honor a person's work, passions, or spirit, and can be shaped like airplanes, hammers, light bulbs, chili peppers, fish, even a luxury car, a ketchup bottle, and a Kit Kat bar with a USB port. One of the most revered artists working in this tradition is Jacob Ashong, who learned the craft from his father, the legendary coffin artist Pa Joe, whose name he now carries on. For over 50 years, they've created fantasy coffins for local residents, art galleries, even for presidents, international dignitaries, and celebrities. Jacob makes just a few coffins a month, each one hand-carved and painted in brilliant colors, like
the lion coffin, the eagle coffin, the rhino coffin. We have a lot of the Mercedes Benz. Yeah, so these are some of the outstanding pieces we usually do.
So when people order a coffin, how does the process go? I imagine that you meet with them or that you need to know a lot more information about the person who you're making a coffin for. How does the whole process go and how long does it take?
Yeah, so when someone dies, it is the family who decides on the coffin. Sometimes they bring an image or a photo of what they want to do. And sometimes they only tell us, we want a coffin in the shape of a pen because he was a teacher. And we can take it from there. It takes sometimes probably between 4 weeks and above, depending on the details of the coffin. So a fish coffin can take probably around 3 to 4 weeks, whilst an eagle coffin, because of the feathers, the details, can take 8 weeks and above.
When someone buys a piece of art to bury their loved one in, this piece of art goes into the ground.
Yes.
So in a way, it's sort of like, you make this beautiful thing and then it will be concealed forever and fall into the soil.
Exactly. You see, this is one of our biggest challenge, looking at the time to create this art piece. But in Ghana, one of the beliefs is that life still continues in the afterlife. So they believe since you are traveling with an object of your career, it still continues in the afterlife. So we understand that the Mercedes-Benz I have taken weeks to produce is traveling to the afterlife spiritually. So sometimes it makes sense to them, yes, and that's how it works.
Well, you talk about some of the reactions you've gotten from your clients, because I think about, they've just lost someone they deeply care about. They have invested in this beautiful piece of art to bury their loved one in. What have been some moments that you've seen when people see these coffins for the first time?
They get very fascinated. And sometimes people gamble over these coffins. People tell you, no, it's not a coffin. It is real. It is real. It's not a coffin. Yes. For the first time, anytime they see a piece of coffins like this.
Do they ever get emotional?
We do.
I'd like to hear how it feels for you as a creator and as someone who's helping the people in their community process this grief and also contribute to the traditions that they believe in and that matter so much to them. How does it feel for you to be doing this work?
In Ghana, people see a funeral sometimes as a celebration of life. People talk about death and they understand the transition of life. And that's the reason why sometimes people spend so much money, in getting this coffin for their deceased to travel to the afterlife. We believe in that also.
Now, you've had some very notable clients and visitors. You've met former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, former US President Bill Clinton, and Conan O'Brien, the comedian.
Do people ever get a coffin made in the shape of the thing that killed them?
Yes.
This is a bottle of Coca-Cola. So this is someone who died of type 2 diabetes. The great thing about this turkey coffin is that you get to be the stuffing.
And Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, yes, he also has some pieces,
Can you say what he bought from you?
I think a chili pepper and an elephant.
I really thought he would have brought a peanut. What was that like to be meeting all these world famous leaders for you? What was it like?
We get excited and we feel proud.
People who order coffins from you are ordering designs based on what they did for work. And so, of course, if I were in Ghana or this is something I wanted, I'm a public radio host and I love my work. So would it make sense maybe if I ordered a giant microphone like the one I'm speaking into? Yeah?
Exactly. That's what happens here in Ghana. And it will be well received, And sometimes I said it's the family who decide. And sometimes people write testaments, that when I died, I want to be buried in this. I want to be buried in that. You see, only the royals in Ghana are allowed to be buried in an eagle coffin, a lion coffin, as a sign of authority. Besides, so when you're not from the royals, you are not being allowed to be buried in such coffins.
So in Ghana, this is culture, this is tradition.
Yes.
Whereas I think in the United States, for those who are not quite so open-minded, they may see pictures of a giant eagle coffin or a giant Mercedes-Benz coffin and be like, that's offensive to death. Death is supposed to be solemn. Death is supposed to be sad. Death isn't supposed to be celebratory. How do you feel about that reaction?
It is otherwise. In Ghana, it's a celebration of life. So when people died and on their way to the cemetery, they are being carried by pallbearers, and there's a procession, a very big procession, and they have to parade through all the streets in the community to say goodbye. And the dancings and the staff, you will love it. It becomes very, very attractive and very, very lovely.
So if I would be buried in a giant microphone because this is my job, you make coffins. So what would you be buried in? It hurts my brain a little bit.
Maybe one of the working tools, like a chisel, a hammer, a plane, a saw.
Oh, totally. Which one's your favorite? There's got to be one you could narrow it down to.
The chisel.
The chisel. A giant chisel. I can see it. Well, Pa Joe, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you too.
Audacious is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin de Martinez, Khalil Rahman, Meg Fitzgerald, and Robin Doyon-Aitken at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, with help from our interns Coco Cooley and Isaac Moss. And you may have noticed that we at Audacious think it's so important to talk about death. Our first episode ever featured death doula Elua Arthur. We also talked with Dr. David Myers on his reflections on living as he approached the end of his life. And producer Jessica Severin de Martinez guest hosted an episode featuring her conversation with Jason Green, author of Once More We Saw Stars, on coping with the death of his 2-year-old daughter, Greta. You can hear all of these life-changing and life-affirming conversations at ctpublic.org/audacious. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace.